HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Today's program has been brought to you by the International Culinary Center, offering courses that range from classic French techniques in culinary, pastry, and bread baking to Italian studies to management, from culinary technology to food writing, from cake making to wine tasting. For more information, visit internationalculinarycenter.com.
I'm Dave Arnold, host of Cooking Issues. You're listening to Heritage Radio Network, broadcasting live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. If you like this program, visit heritageradionetwork.org for thousands more.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Heritage Radio Network. We are coming to you, as always, live from the back of Roberta's Pizza here in Bushwick, Brooklyn. Today you've tuned into the Farm Report, and I'm your host, Erin Fairbanks. And today we're going to be starting a little bit of a conversation around farming, GMOs, and media transparency. A couple things out there happening in the world that gave me pause this week, and I don't know if many of my regular Farm Report listeners know, but we also do daily news content on the main website of the Heritage Radio Network, which is www.heritageradionetwork.org. And I wanted to share a couple of news pieces that we put together this week around this subject. In just a second, we're going to hear a short clip with Jim Garretson of Wood Prairie Farm. But just to kind of set the scene, we're going to be talking about a recent article that came out in the New Yorker by Michael Spector entitled Seeds of Doubt, where he kind of takes to task Vandana Shiva, who's probably best known for her anti-globalization and anti-GE advocacy. And I have to say, Vandana first came on my radar probably back in 2006, 2007. I think someone passed me a copy of one of her books, a book she co-wrote with Carla Petrini and Jamie Leonette, entitled Manifestos on the Future of Food and Seed. For a long time, I've really looked to her work as kind of a national perspective on some different ways to think about human rights as they relate to farming, and how to think about on a global scale the GE and the implications of a farming system that includes GMOs. And so it was with a lot of eagerness that I approached Michael's piece, and it kicked up a lot of stuff for me. And I reached out to some people kind of in our orbit here to think a little bit more about how to think about this piece. We're going to hear from them, and then in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about some other stuff that's been happening over at Conde Nast. The New Yorker is a publication that is under that subheading of Conde Nast, and lots of going on in the world of GMOs and media and farming. So stay tuned. We're going to bring you now this short clip from Jim. Vandana Shiva, Indian environmentalist and longtime anti-globalization crusader, probably best known for her strong and vocal opposition to GMO and GE technology, was recently profiled in a New Yorker article by Michael Spector, titled Seeds of Doubt. In the piece, Michael calls into question much of Shiva's work. We called Jim Garretson of Wood Prairie Farm, an organic seed farm in Bridgewater, Maine. Jim, also a longtime anti-GMO activist, had this to say.
No one is perfect. You aren't. I'm not. Vandana, no doubt, is not. But there is a clear pattern from industrial ag, from biotech and the chemical companies. And this is a pattern that goes back for many years. One might find the beginning with Dr. Arpad Putstai from Scotland, who questioned genetically engineered potatoes and was immediately castigated by the biotech industry. And then Ignacio Chapella at UC at Berkeley talking about concerns of contamination of the birthplace of maize or corn in Mexico being contaminated by genetically engineered crops. And then more recently, Dr. Donald Huber, who questions the use of glyphosate, which is the 80% of GMO crops are glyphosate, Roundup ready, Roundup tolerant crops, and more recently the Syngenta attack on Dr. Tyrone Hayes, who has conducted studies into the damages caused by their product, the herbicide atrazine. So I think that initially one can only conclude that this is just another episode in an attempt to tear down anyone who dares to question the products that industrial ag and biotech want to push upon the American people.
Well, it's pretty scary because, it's coming from the New Yorker, and I think, too, we're seeing from the New York Times, a lot of the pieces by Amy Harmon over the course of the last year in a similar vein. So if, we're looking at these kind of two publications of note and of record, is this like... It just feels like that must be very insidious. I mean, I wonder how, as a normal consumer, when you look to these spaces as trusted media resources, are you suggesting that they're being kind of co-opted by the biotech industry, or there's some other back end outside of that reporter's position, or where are things getting confused, do you think?
Well, very recently, reporter Tom Philpott in Mother Jones wrote a really good expose article on the Conde Nast attempt to trick leaders of the good food movement, including people like Michael Pollan and others, to participate in a Monsanto-funded PR campaign that they wouldn't admit that Monsanto was in back of. So it was supposedly a strategic alliance between Monsanto and Conde Nast. I think there are serious concerns of where we have a free media, short of going to the internet, and even there, one has to do a good job at sorting out truth from fiction.
So Jim's comments really led me in another direction. Thinking about kind of media sources that we can trust. Obviously, one of the names that came to the top of my mind was Tom Philpott. Tom has been a regular guest here on the Heritage Radio Network. He's co-founder of Maverick Farms, which is a center for sustainable food education down in North Carolina. And he's done a lot of writing for Grist. He writes for Newsweek, Astronomica, The Guardian, and most recently put together an interesting piece in Mother Jones that kind of explored the Conde Nast situation that Jim was alluding to. So we gave Tom a call because we wanted to find out from him his response to the Spectre piece, and this is what he had to say. Michael Spector's August 25th article, Seeds of Doubt, published in The New Yorker, has kicked up quite a bit of controversy in the anti-GMO and GMO conversation. We're on the line with Tom Philpott to get his response. Tom, what did you think of Spector's piece?
Well, Spector is a writer who has been extremely enthusiastic about GMOs for years and extremely dismissive about any concern. And so I went into the piece knowing that. I wrote a review of his book, Denialism, 4 or 5 years ago, which I found to be a pretty weak book. It focused on science denialism, but never mentioned climate change denialism, which I think is the kind of number one denialist enterprise of our time. And so I went into it with I took it with a grain of salt, and the thing about it is that Vandana Shiva, like a lot of activists, isn't. I think she sometimes moves more into sort of passionate advocacy ahead of rigor. She's not always the most rigorous critic, and I think Spector has been able to seize upon some of her excesses to drive home, the assumptions that he went into the piece with, which is that GMOs are this important, vital technology to feeding the world. And so, in the end, I didn't really learn much from his piece. I already know what I already knew what he thought. It was obvious that he was no fan of Vandana Shiva, and none of the things that he exposed about her, I think she overstates the farmer suicide problem in India and its connection with Monsanto. I mean, obviously, as Spector says, it's all about lack of credit, lack of access to funds. But one of the reasons why farmers need so much access to funds and credit is that these technologies that they're buying, like fertilizer, insecticides, and yes, even GMO seeds, are more expensive than farming without them, and so they are tied into the system where they need these chemicals and other inputs, and they need credit to get to them. And so I think that there is a broad connection between industrialized farming and the suicides that Shiva overstates, but it doesn't exonerate industrial agriculture as Spector seems to suggest.
So as we move forward in this GMO conversation, I feel like to the layperson, seeing an article published in the New Yorker gives it a lot of status or credence. And what do you think this has done to kind of stall or move forward the conversation for folks with regards to understanding what's happening as it relates to GMOs?
I think that's a very astute comment. I mean, I think the New Yorker is a very prestigious publication, and I think that it is very rigorously fact-checked. And I think there is going to be a portion of people who read that and feel like the debate is closed, that Spector has the answers, and the Vandana Shiva is a charlatan or a phony or something like that. And I think that the reality is a lot more complex than that. So I think in that sense, I think it's unfortunate, and it moves to shut down debate when, just sort of by prestige of the publication, when I think there is much more debate to be had on this question.
And, I mean, how would you compare or contrast this to the work of Amy Harmon through the New York Times? Because I think we're seeing a similar kind of more pro-GMO stance coming out of that publication as well.
Yeah, Amy Harmon has, I think she also goes into stories with a lot of assumptions that aren't examined. They also have someone named Stephanie Strom at the Times who I think writes with a proper sense of skepticism. I mean, I don't think she has necessarily a dog in the fight, but she doesn't take industry view as sort of gold standard. And one of the things about Harmon, one of her more recent pieces on the situation in Hawaii, where there's a big movement in Hawaii, on I think one of the islands in Hawaii, to banish GMOs. And she basically painted the whole movement to banish GMOs in the state as this completely irrational, silly, anti-science movement. And she barely alluded to the fact that in Hawaii, because of its geography and because it, basically is sunny year-round, is a major testing ground for these GMO companies. And so you get 2 and 3 crops a year of crops that are testing, that are resistant to multiple herbicides. So you get these big, these huge fields in Hawaii getting rained down on with herbicides. And so a lot of the movement, no doubt there are crazy people in the GMO movement. There are crazy people in the movement in Hawaii to ban GMOs. But they also have, these people have a very rational thing they're talking about. talking about in their literature, and she basically ignored that and made it seem like they were just these kind of crazies who think if you eat GMOs, you're going to get cancer immediately, when that was not the case.
Yeah, I guess I feel like that's the thing that makes me feel a little bit nervous about the shift in this direction, is that instead of kind of continuing to have a really substantive debate, we're painting one folks as like, secure science and another group of people as kind of fringe radicals. And that to me seems like the danger. Where should people look aside from hopping on Google and doing a random search and trying to distill it ourselves? Do you have recommendations for publications, or maybe can you direct us to some of your own work that you feel has been, useful in kind of getting a little more nuanced picture of this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I have always, I try to give a nuanced picture of my work no matter what, and have been doing that. And, I think you can look up my reaction to Amy Harmon's piece on oranges, which I think was about a year ago, and I looked really hard into it, talked to scientists, talked to USDA people, and said, hey, this might be one case where GMOs might bring a solution, at least for a while. No one thinks it's a permanent solution to this citrus greening problem in orange groves. But yeah, I try to bring a nuance. I talk to scientists. One scientist who I think is really, really good on this stuff is Doug Gurry and Sherman. And Doug now works for, I think, he was at Union of Concerned Scientists, and he recently changed jobs. But if you Google his name, Doug Gurry and Sherman, he might be at, he's either at Environmental Defense or Food and Water Watch. I'm not sure which. But he is a molecular biologist, PhD, who works at the USDA when they were green-lighting GMO crops, and he's just got a really nuanced view. He'll tell you that, no, he doesn't think you're going to talk that if you eat them. And, basically his view and my view are pretty similar, and that is that if you look at the challenges facing global agriculture and the challenges facing U.S. agriculture as part of that, there are a lot of real problems happening. There is this massive drought in California that looks like it's going to be a long-term thing. There's a problem in the Corn Belt where we're losing topsoil at an alarming rate, losing topsoil way faster than it's being reproduced in the field. There is, generally speaking, we're going to have more drought, more heavy rain events. Obviously, populations are growing. And GMOs, if you look really hard at it, don't really provide interesting solutions to any of these problems. And there are a lot of things that are a lot cheaper. When research is a lot cheaper, implementation is a lot cheaper, that have been proven to solve these problems. I read about one of them last year. If you Google my name, and the name is David Brandt. He's a farmer in Ohio. He is doing things that are, he's a big corn and soy farmer in Ohio, fifth-generation farmer, not some hippie at all. And he's doing things with cover crops and crop rotations that are saving soil, making it more resilient to heavy rains, making it more resilient to drought. And he's using GMO seeds, but not because of the traits, but because they're the only seeds he can get his hands on that have the companies, their dominance in the market is so great that if you want to get corn seeds that have the latest genetics, and when I say genetics, I mean conventional genetics that, are the most drought tolerant, the most established, the fastest, and things like that, your only choice is to pay the extra technology fee and buy the GMO seed. But he's not using them for that at all, but he's getting fantastic results from doing things that aren't GM, that any farmers could do, that are, really critical to feeding the world going forward. So I just feel like GMOs are this false distraction from the real thinking we need to do about how to change our farming system.
Well, Tom, thank you so much, and we definitely look forward to connecting with you on this issue. as we can continue to look at this question of, how we're going to feed 9 billion people by 2050. And thanks for taking some time out to share your response.
Sure thing. And you guys are always welcome to call me, or, I'm always happy to be on the Heritage Network.
All right. So that was a little bit more nuanced view from Tom, who kind of helped illuminate some of the things we should be thinking about as we're approaching this GMO conversation. And with that, we are going to go for a short station break. And when we come back, we'll be continuing this conversation as it relates to GMOs, farming, and media transparency. So hang tight.
Let's do it.
You are listening to Young Blood by The Hollows.
Stones thrown away. Since that day, my best friend has been this rotary telephone. It's the next best thing to a southern hug from a mama that I left all alone. On a young blood, treat my mama right. On a young blood, take her out tonight. Oh, they say you're the talk of the town.
The International Culinary Center is a proud sponsor of the heritageradionetwork.org. The ICC, with locations in New York and California, provide cutting-edge education to future chefs, restaurateurs, and wine professionals. We're proud to claim Dan Barber, Bobby Flay, and David Chang among our honored alumni. This is Dorothy Can Hamilton from Chef Story. Check out our ICC website at internationalculinarycenter.com.
This is Brandon Hoy, co-owner of Roberta's, and you're listening to heritageradionetwork.org.
So it was kind of funny working on these pieces in response to the Spectre article this week and hearing this Conde Nast conversation coming up. All of a sudden I realized I'd seen this email. As it turns out, our founder, Heritage Foods USA, was in some pretty good company. On August 4th, we received an email from Conde Nast Media Group inviting the Heritage Foods team to take part in a video series that focused on topics that centered around food chains, and sustainability. Sounds pretty cool, right? I mean, since the company started in 2001, its focus has been on celebrating meat, the righteous kind, from healthy animals of sound genetics that have been treated humanely and allowed to pursue their natural instincts. Antibiotics and growth hormones are not part of that system. The environment is respected, and fair labor is practiced. That's from their website, www.heritagefoodsusa.com. And full disclosure, I work with them. Not only are they our founder, one of our biggest supporters here at Heritage Radio, but I also spend one day a week, Tuesdays, working as part of their wholesale team. So, this email got forwarded to the group, and we were pretty excited. What a great opportunity to share the important work that the company does with the audiences of Bon Appetit, GQ, Details, right on. Plus, as the email stated, Mo Rocca of CBS Sunday Morning would be hosting the panel, and he's a pretty cool dude. So what was the problem? Well, as it turns out, the project was being underwritten by Monsanto, the global egg giant best known for its work in pesticides and GMO seed sales. Don't get me wrong, Monsanto is totally free to support anyone they want. And here at Heritage Radio, we're all for rigorous discussion around the GMO and GE conversation. I think it's super important to have a nuanced and to the extent that it's possible, a balanced conversation in these issues. In fact, our very own Dave Arnold, who hosts a weekly program called Cooking Issues every Tuesday at noon, moderated a GMO panel that included Amy Harmon, who I mentioned a couple of times in the first half of the show, who's done a number of pieces reporting on the GMO industry. Also on the panel that Dave put together was Kathleen Enright. So she's the executive VP for the Food Agriculture Biotechnology Industry Org. So basically a advocacy organization for the biotech industry. And I have to say, you know, that panel discussion is definitely available on the Heritage Radio website. So you can definitely look up the MoFad Roundtable. Really great conversations around the GMO issue, really diverse set of perspectives. And I have to say, you know, Kathleen drove home some pretty compelling cases for the industry, as is her job. I think the problem with this email, the really big problem, is that nowhere in the email was it made clear that the project was being underwritten by an organization that, you know, is such a divisive player in the food world. Nowhere did it say, oh, by the way, Conde Nast is working with Monsanto on this cool food project. It wasn't until we called and asked for clarification and asked who was funding and supporting the work that we learned that it was being underwritten by this group. And, you know, we decided it wasn't a great decision for the organization. In doing a little bit of research for the show, and after talking to Tom, you know, I came upon this August 7th article that he had put out in Mother Jones. And it turns out that, you know, Heritage Foods was in pretty good company. Others who were asked to participate on this panel and as part of this video series were NYU professor, author of Food Politics, and, you know, frequent HRN guest Marion Nussel, Anna Lepay, who's author of the famous Diet for a Hot Planet and has been a longtime critic of the agrochemical industry, James McWilliams, who's an author of Just Food, what every locavore gets wrong and how we can truly eat responsible. Lori Silverbush, producer of A Place on the Table. The list goes on. And apparently Mo Rocca, the celebrity moderator who is mentioned in the initial email, was never even confirmed. So here's the thing. Here's this long list of food iconoclasts who saw the same pitch and saw it for what it was and said no. But I have to say, for a small organization like ours here at Heritage Radio, or the folks over at Heritage Foods, the offer of a speaking fee, especially, you know, for a small group like ours, is pretty compelling. And the opportunity to put your message in front of the Conde Nast audience is also pretty exciting. And I'm sure that there's other types of offers like this floating around, probably more than we know. And I have to wonder kind of who's going to be the first to say yes to it. Whether they're saying yes because, you know, they're cash strapped and they need the money. They, you know, don't read the fine print and realize what they're saying yes to, and then their name and their reputation is co-opted. Or, you know, maybe they're selling out or compromising some of their underlying principles in lieu of the platform that an organization like Conde Nast presents. I think, you know, the lack of transparency here is a huge bummer. And at Heritage Radio Network, we're really disappointed that Conde Nast didn't do a better job of presenting a clear offer. But I have to say, we are definitely proud of our fellow allies in good food for seeing the pitch for what it was and for acting in accordance to their values and beliefs. That's all I got for you today on the Farm Report. Thank you so much for tuning in. Would love to hear your thoughts on this issue. Please, you know, give us a tweet at heritage_radio or shoot us an email, info@heritageradionetwork.org. And stay tuned in. This program, like all 35 of our weekly shows, is available for free by visiting our website, www.heritageradionetwork.org. If you believe in our work, I hope you'll consider becoming a member by clicking that donate tab and supporting us today. You can also find us on iTunes or Stitcher Smart Radio. However you listen, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to this program on heritageradionetwork.org. You can find all of our archive programs on our website or as podcasts in the iTunes store by searching Heritage Radio Network. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at heritage_radio. You can email us questions anytime at info@heritageradionetwork.org. Heritage Radio Network is a 501c3 non-profit. To donate and become a member, visit our website today. Thanks for listening.